and to hear us say difficult things sometimes, because we're talking about how I am affected as opposed to what you're doing to me.
If the people in our society were more able to implement nonviolent behaviors in their personal lives, what might be the beneficial societal effect of that?
Well, certainly in a nonviolent ethic and movement, we want to be able to relate to the people who might be termed the enemy or opposition. And so we need to put ourselves in their shoes and consider what we look like from their perspective. Certainly in Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous anti-Vietnam War speech, his Declaration of Independence from the war in Vietnam, he certainly does that, trying to speak on behalf of the North Vietnamese to the American people so that we might hear how we look in their eyes. And so it's a nonviolent ethic to try to put ourselves in the other's shoes so that we can relate to their experience.
Whether it's on the scale of my wife and I or two nations.
Absolutely, either way. Both are important. Both have massive benefits for society because we have happier homes and communities, and between nations there would be more ease in international affairs.
Please tell us what the mission of the War Resisters League is.
The mission of the War Resisters League, actually we have an affirmation that we affirm that war is a crime against humanity, and we pledge to resist all wars, both civil and international, nonviolently. We affirm that all war is a crime against humanity. We therefore are determined not to support any kind of war, international or civil, and to strive nonviolently against all the causes of war.
Please tell us one or two projects that the War Resisters League does to encourage the diminishment of causes of war.
The War Resisters League, first of all, we're part of War Resisters International, which is actually a couple years older than the league itself. WRL is the United States chapter of War Resisters International, and collectively we have programs including the Right to Refuse to Kill, which supports conscientious objectors around the world. In this country, conscientious objectors are people in the military who realize that they've had some change of heart, that they can no longer carry out the functions and be in the military. So we support the GI Rights Hotline, which supports people who become conscientious objectors, but also others who are just in conflict with their command or need to better understand the regulations because they have some dependency or hardship issue or a disability that is not being understood or respected by someone in their command. And knowing the regulations helps a soldier deal with that. So the GI Rights Hotline is very important in supporting conscientious objectors. We work against war profiteering and trying to expose the enormous greed and the effect on policy that war profiteering has. A new campaign of the War Resisters League that we just have taken up in response to an international call is a program against tear gas. Now, tear gas is a non-lethal weapon which is being used increasingly with increasing lethality and is being sold and used in increasing ways, harsh ways, against populations all over the world. So it's an interesting new campaign that WRL has just taken up recently.
Is there a way forward, using peaceful means, that there can be a two-state solution where the rights and the security of both parties are respected equally? And if so, how do we arrive at that from where we are today?
Well, for a two-state solution to exist, and I think very practical ones have been proposed. The Arab League plan was brought up again and given a little more respect a year and a half or so ago than it was the first time around. But very importantly, that plan calls for normalization, full normalization of relations between Israel and its neighbors, not
would include
including Iran and Saudi Arabia, and called for full normalization, not just an end of hostilities, but normalization of relations. And when proposals like that come up, they have to not be sabotaged by some F-16 attack on Hamas, which I'm not a Hamas sympathizer at all, but if we say we're for democracy and someone we don't like gets elected, we have to acknowledge that that's democracy. For normalization of relations to happen, like the Arab peace plan said, we need to not just dismiss these proposals out of hand, acknowledge that maybe they're coming from a place of really trying to move us forward. If we want a two-state solution, then the settlements will need to go. Now, in some ways, and certainly some Israeli commentators I agree with, is that it's not clear what Israel, as it currently exists, has to gain from peace, because so much of the Israeli society is based on militarism, be it how you gain credence and honor in the society is through military service.
With all of the damage, with all of the hurt on both sides, with all the fear on both sides, is there a way forward, and if so, how? What would be required of both sides, briefly?
In international relations, the term confidence-building measures, well, certainly confidence-building measures are needed on both sides. I think there have been times when they've been taken by one or the other. I think because Israel holds the reins of power and is in control over the Palestinian people, the onus is on Israel, not Palestine, to lead the way. On the Palestinian side, certainly no more rockets from Gaza. If Israel deals more justly with the Palestinian citizens, I think the Palestinian citizens will be very happy to be part of Israel. I don't think that they currently are.
What is the Martin de Porres House of Hospitality?
Martin de Porres is a soup kitchen in San Francisco. It was started in the Catholic worker tradition, which the Catholic worker movement goes back to the Depression. It was started by Dorothy Day and Peter Marin, and I think is one of the most inspiring social movements ever, and exists now. Independent houses, over 200 of them worldwide, mostly in the United States, but also abroad. And there is no central Catholic worker body. They're all independent, but networked. It's a thriving movement, and Martin de Porres runs what I think is a fountain of love in the world. The people there are treated with dignity, and there is a free lunch at Martin's. I spent 13 years living in community as part of the team that ran it, the core group, and it made me a much better person. I learned the ideal of selflessness and caring for others there more than anywhere else in my life.
What made you move to Las Vegas?
What I just said about the Martin de Porres community notwithstanding, I was part of it for 21 years. It ran its course. I needed to move on. I needed to get out of the Bay Area just for some different perspective, to feel like I could live somewhere else, that I didn't have to feel trapped, or trapped myself there, feeling like I wanted to be there for the rest of my life. And I knew of Nevada Desert Experience. I knew they were looking for a coordinator to do this anti-nuclear work. And Las Vegas isn't so far from the Bay Area, and so it seemed like a good move. I appreciate the power of the desert against nuclear weapons, and so, and I knew people on the board and former staff people. So it seemed like a good move for me. So 4 years ago, I moved to Las Vegas to be the coordinator of Nevada Desert Experience.
You listed a number of organizations that you have as relevant affiliations. Jewish Voice for Peace, War Resisters League, U.S. Campaign to End Israeli Occupation, GI Rights Hotline, United for Peace and Justice Bay Area. There's a couple of others. If you had to pick one or two that stands out as being most central to what you think matters in your life, which one would it be and why?
As Jewish as I am, I would say the Catholic worker movement. The Catholic worker movement is not only for Catholics, especially in this day. There are many pagan Catholic workers, there are atheist Catholic workers.
I know a woman who's a Methodist minister who worked in one for about 10 years.
So I think the message and practice of the Catholic worker movement is an example to the world. Peter Morin wrote these easy essays. I'm not sure if this is one of his, but one ideal is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. Now, to afflict the comfortable doesn't mean to ruin them, but it does mean to say, you've got a lot of coats, someone else needs one, give them a coat.
Or two or three.
Yeah, you know, I'm not averse to people having style consciousness, but we can overdo it. So it's important to share. I think the ethic and practice of the Catholic worker movement is a blessing on the world, more than anything else.
Do you have a personal spiritual practice other than attendance at organized worship services? And if so, what is it?
I go in and out of a spiritual practice. I sometimes wish that I were more disciplined in that regard. Right now I am trying to devote at least 10 minutes a day to stillness, and I can do what I want with that time. If I want to journal or just sit and not think about work. And I, for a time, practiced some ayin meditation, which is real mind emptying as opposed to having a mantra. And I was able to do that for slightly longer periods of time between thoughts drifting in. But I do get very caught up in my daily life, and I would benefit from increasing my practice again. And so just sitting in stillness is good. I got into yoga when I moved here, and that has helped a great deal also for quieting my mind. I need to quiet my mind more and listen to what comes in.
One of our viewers was so traumatized by the faith tradition in which they were raised, or perhaps they were raised in none at all, but they have a resentment against organized religion. They're walking around with this hard shell on them, right? But they hear people talking about spirituality, higher power, those kinds of concepts, and it seems attractive to them, but they're afraid. If you say, go read the Psalms to them, they're just going to ignore you. Is there an entry-level, non-threatening, beginner spiritual practice that you could suggest to someone like that might help alleviate the hard shell of resentment that they have?
You know, I have many Catholic friends who term themselves recovering Catholics. People who've genuinely been hurt by what was pushed on them as a religion, which I think misrepresented and dishonored actual Catholic teachings. The Catholic worker movement has opened up many, and that made them feel they didn't have to be recovering, but maybe a little bit more selective, but not to reject all of it, because there are amazing examples of love from people of all faiths. So we just need to remember that. There's, I can't remember what EFT stands for, but it's a practice of tapping on body parts. And I think it's good to, you know,